This is Hunter Muse
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening.
to The Melt.
Well, let's start with kind of what we were talking about last time, but maybe an updated version of that. I What, if anything, is going on with the Project Looking Glass narrative and the Guardians of the Looking Glass? I know they have kind of been off the radar for a while, but is there anything developing, like all of these events that were supposed to happen? Any more new news on that?
Well, if you recall what they said in their very first um, videos, is they said that there's going to be a series of events that are going to happen between now and 2030, but the most important one, and probably the most critical one to stop, was April 18th,
Mm-hmm.
because that was going to set in motion that whole timeline irreversibly if they pulled that off with the bombing and the blame game and the leading to an escalated, nuclear war situation with Putin. And so, and then, because we stopped it and we had this mass focus on all of this stuff, they kept getting more and more pressure, to the point where I believe that even their channel was infiltrated, because there was a couple of videos that didn't really seem to make sense. And, so they kept trying to put those videos out. And I think in the end, their last video, they introduced the Gideon and the White Hat hackers that were working on this CSRQ software. And then they've never been able to publish, or they've never published anything since. So I think, what happened is that they just realized that no matter how many times they tried with mails, they tried separate things where you would write them and then they would, send you an email privately on Proton mail. But that got hacked. Interestingly, the timing on the hacks on Proton shut down a couple of times for maintenance reasons and to upgrade their systems, they said. And they coincided exactly with what the timing was on Looking Glass Guardian messages. So was that a coincidence? Hard to say, hard to prove, but it certainly is interesting, the timing of it. And so I think what happened is that they just backed off, and they let now actually, I think probably the most critical thing to prevent is CSRQ. This digital currency, this programmable digital currency. So I think that's kind of the direction that what I've been reading, those posts that are putting out. I mean, I had my own reservations about their strategy, which I made very clear to them at the very beginning. And they didn't agree with my criticism, if you want to call it constructive criticism, if you want to call it that. So, they kind of blocked me out. And at that point, I guess I could have gone back in and said, I'm not the bad guy and blah, blah, blah. But I'm not like that. I'm like, look, I'm very valuable. I'm high integrity, and I'm useful, and I'm very creative. So if you want me, approach me. And if you don't, I'll do my own thing anyway. And the way it's gone for me now is that I've read those intel drops that are coming out from Gideon. And I find them to be extremely accurate, I got to say, about what's going on. Maybe not always like on the cutting edge. I mean, he was talking about they're coming up with this list that they're going to put things into the. Can we talk about all this stuff, or are you guys going to get blocked if we talk about, the jab and all that?
We haven't gotten blocked yet. I mean, if you feel like it's super triggering for the algorithms. We can do it after the second hour, but we haven't had any problem with that. So maybe talk in
Yeah,
a little code or something.
coded. Yeah. So what he was talking about that I thought was interesting was these food lists
Mhm,
and how the vaccination, the industry, the food industry uses immunization on livestock
Mhm.
to with heaven for decades, really. The only difference being now that mRNA technology has been developed, they are using that because it's faster and cheaper. So we now have the potential, or I mean, literally, I mean, people are claiming it, and I believe it, that we already have contamination in the food supply. And not only that, but if you read, I also read Karen Kingston report,
mhm,
and she breaks down the patents very carefully because she used to be a member of, or she used to be an employee at Pfizer, and she was a science patent technical advisor, and she was often on mainstream television. And now that she's been a whistleblower, of course, they canceled her, and she has her own Substack, and she's talking about she actually has the patents, and she breaks them down and shows us where it says how they're going to be applying the patent technology. And clearly, even before Gideon talked about any kind of lists or contamination of the food supply, Karen Kingston had that information out there, and it was sort of getting everywhere, So they're not always on the 100% cutting edge, but everything that they've said, everything that this Gideon guy talks about, is realistic, unfortunately, and legit. It's just not sugar coated.
yeah, that's for sure.
And and one of the things that he was talking about that took it in the direction that I was a little bit surprised is that he said that they were using um, the beetle juice to keep people from entering, to keep them alive, to
Mhm,
keep people who have not drunk the Kool-Aid yet,
yeah.
to get them to take it, and that would prolong their lives indefinitely. In other words, they would no longer pass into the astral realm upon leaving their bodies, because they would be trapped in their bodies.
Mhm,
The reason being that they wanted to keep as many people here from transcending that are high-minded, because they would be a formidable force on the astral plane, fighting, from that place,
mhm,
because we have us here on Earth, and we have the people in the astral, and some people believe we have the ETs, etc. And then the others that had already drank the juice, they were that had brought it had disconnected their soul from their bodies, and when they passed over, they went to a very, like, almost like a form of hell. They
Wow.
got trapped in another plane, of another level of existence. And I thought, when I read that, I thought, okay, this is really getting out there. It's like,
yes, for
I mean,
sure.
for first, it's all this like dry military language,
Mhm,
clinical stuff about code and what's being planned and what digital currency is. And then suddenly it ventured into this spiritual stuff.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, as it turns out, he's right. Because my interview with, Anna Mihalchia yesterday that I did, she's been on the cutting edge with this information. I asked her deliberately about that because I wanted to know. She put out a Substack about how they use plasmons. They can use graphene oxide can be split into different frequencies. The
Mhm.
higher frequencies are called plasmons, and guess what the lower frequencies are called?
I don't know.
Demons.
Wow. Jesus.
It's like,
Can you be more blatant?
can you be more blatant, right? So, yeah, plasmons and demons. And what the demons do is it basically, the technology and their patents is able to tap into using quantum dot technology into the quantum realm. And because of the way, the understanding of quantum sciences now,
Mhm,
they call them these what are they called again? These well, the nanotechnology that they're putting into the Beetlejuice
mhm,
grows into things. Obviously, she's been documenting that, as so has David Nixon. Hydrogel is what basically
Yes.
creates these strings and neural pathways on a nanoscale. And they're
Mhm.
so small that they actually go past the blood-brain barrier into your brain, and they begin to mimic neural network pathways. And once they do that, the way your spirit or your spirit connects to your physical body through the quantum realm, and it connects to the physical realm in terms of spin, electron spin in the
Mhm.
quantum realm. And with these new emulated neural networks that they've created with hydrogel, they can emulate an artificial version of your spin. And the spin is where it's the quality of the spin, the frequency of it. This is where this plasmon and demon stuff comes in. When they lower the frequency, they can hijack your soul, if you want to, if you will, for lack of a better way to describe it, and get it to attach to this artificial version of you.
Like a
And
clone.
like a clone, you literally. And I said, well, what does that mean? Does that mean like they capture your soul, or does your soul say, well, no, I'm done with that physical body, cut it off and I'm out of here? Or can they really bind it? And she was saying basically, yeah, they can actually, both of those things are possible. And some people believe that what's possible is they can actually capture the soul and trap it in, really in a whole other dimensional space, a quantum space that's disconnected from its source. So that's exactly what Gideon was talking about, now explained on the physical patent level, right? So that really blew my mind. So I've been amazed at, like, because I've always been, and I've always told people, do not buy cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Mm.
Because even if they're making it like we have to make these sovereigns and build this sovereign team, my attitude has always been from day one, this is not the right approach. We cannot not even let this thing come to pass,
Mhm.
because I honestly don't believe the moms and pops that you're going to get that are going to come on board as sovereigns are going to have the guts
Yeah.
and the wherewithal to go up against these hardened warriors of Satan, if you want. So
For sure.
they're going to capitulate. They're not going to be able to stand it. I mean, like, I don't believe that. Maybe a couple of them, but honestly, you have to find the best of the best of the best to be able to go into battle on that level. So why not even just forget that and just focus on stopping it from happening, because we can actually do that. We can stop it from happening if we wake up enough people to begin to question the policymakers, the banksters, and to basically say, what are you guys doing? What is this all about? We don't want this, right? So what I'm doing is, I'm doing a speaking tour. I've been on a speaking tour through all of southern Germany, and I was in the States as well.
Mhm.
And I present, the whole timeline, the Project Looking Glass timeline transhumanist concept in understandable terms that ties all of this stuff in, so people are aware of what it is that they need to be doing. If they want to do something, they're always asking, like, what can we do? Well, we can all do something individually, each of us. And everyone has their own particular goal and our own mission, if you will. We've all incarnated into the world as a soul family right now at probably the most critical point in all of history and all of the evolution of at least this version of mankind. Who
Yeah.
knows how many other civilizations and versions there's been? We know there's been Atlantis, Mu and Lemuria.
Mhm.
Who knows how many others, and these civilizations have come and gone. It's like an infinite repeated loop for some reason. And I think the universe wants to make that evolutionary leap to out of that loop cycle as well. So that's why we've all come here now to try and make that happen. We should never underestimate the power that we have as individuals and as a soul family on this earth. And that's what I'm trying to do with the talks that I do. I'm trying to get people to wake up and realize that you're creator beings, that you are very, very powerful, far more powerful than any nanotechnology or any robots or any transhumanism realities will ever be. But we
Mhm.
have to act now. We can't wait until it's too late, because if they really do pull this off and they get their timeline anchored in and they get this programmable digital currency going, it's really, as far as I know, I think that's going to be the end. That's the end game right there. So, yeah.
We hear that the soul is this impervious part of ourselves, aspect of ourselves that can't be that something like that can't happen to, and also that we live in a universe, or at least a sliver of the universe, that operates on karmic principle, where you cannot do something to somebody against their will unless you implicitly or explicitly get their um,
Consent.
consent. Yes.
Right.
So where does that fall on that scale? I mean, does that just somehow sidestep all of that, or?
Well, they have been telling us what they're doing. That's the
Mhm.
thing. They
Sure.
have been getting our consent step by step. Everything that we allow them to pull off in the world is our consent. They've shown us in movies, they've done it. I mean, you've probably realized or seen now, noticed more and more that these so-called elites, which I think is a terrible word. I think they're more like parasites than elites.
Yeah, I don't call them
Um,
that.
but let's say the parasites
Indeed.
out there, they've been telling us what their plans are, what they're doing, and they're not even they used to be secretive, and you'd hear about these Bilderbergers and these different groups, the Club of Rome, and people would whisper about them, but now they have their website and they're open about
Yeah.
it, and they don't care. They're just telling us what they're going to do, and they're
Well,
showing us what they're going to do, and they're passing legislation telling us what they're going to do. I mean, like here, I'll give you an example, okay, of that legislation stuff. Right here, President Biden, yeah, has basically set up a law that is telling us that they're going to develop software. Why don't I have that here? Is it in the other slides? Hold on. That they're going to create and develop software that is going to I can't find it now.
take your time.
But it's okay. I'm just telling you the gist of it.
Mhm.
I honestly, I mean it. It's real. It is there. It's a legislation executive order that is demanding that the industry pick up the pace on developing these nanotechnologies, these biological nanotechnologies in the pharma industry, so that they can basically program and reprogram the human DNA like code, like software. It's written right into that law. And so they're telling us that that's a law that's out there. People can say, no, we don't want that, or they can contest it, or they can argue about it, but nobody's doing that.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that they do is they distract us from the real issues. They tell us that, the big issue is that gain of function.
Mhm.
It's all about gain of function now. And that they're now admitting that they caught their fingers in the cookie jar. They were in the Wuhan labs developing gain of function, and it's now indisputable. So these viruses, got these gain of function. But what they're not telling you about is that they've changed the definition of gain of function. So what may have been gain of function in the past, and I think I've even got a quote of that, basically they are saying here, let's see if I can find that one about the gain of function. Yeah. Under the historical definition, gain of function may include technology as a delivery mechanism. For example, the use of technology to aerosolize a weaponized mRNA virus. But beyond the use of technology as a delivery device, the historical definition of gain of function was inclusive of the fusion of a pathogenic organism with nanotechnologies, the merger of biology with technology to create an AI bioweapon. Okay, that's what the historical definition of it was.
Mhm.
But the NIH in 2021 decided they're going to change the definition of gain of function before too many people look at it, probably. And the
Mhm.
new definition since May 26, 2022 is the term gain of function refers to any genetic mutation in an organism that confers, or in other words, results in a new or enhanced ability. Right? So
We
what does
just
that mean in English? It means they're saying they're taking these viruses and they're making them more deadly,
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
biological, they're advancing its functionality as a virus, but they've taken the whole bioweapon part of it out. And by doing that, they're able to now put all the focus and the news on, they're allowing that story to break. You have to realize that these parasites, they're not dumb, unfortunately. They've been guiding this thing along all the way. I think on one of the shows I did with John Nolan, I quoted Karl Rove talking about empire and how they keep us, our nose is following the carrot that they
Yeah.
want to point. So
Mhm.
now you have to ask yourself, why is suddenly it permitted to talk about gain of function in Wuhan labs, where it was totally verboten a year ago? Their policing mechanisms of the internet have only improved in the last 2 years, not become more lax. So they could
Mhm.
shut that story down in no time if they wanted to. But they're not. They're letting that story get out there. Why? Because they want everyone to focus on the virus with the new definition of gain of function. So it's like the magician putting his hand over here, but really what the issue is the fact that they've created a bioweapon and they've injected that bioweapon into the bloodstreams of 2/3 of the people on the planet. And that thing's out there coursing now in the veins of all these people, unbeknownst of what it really truly is. That's the discussion we need to be having right now, all around the world. Instead, we're talking about Wuhan labs and gain of function. And the other one that they're telling us is that, oh, Pfizer, we can't sue them because they have a secret contract with the Pentagon that gave them immunity from being sued. And there's people out there that are telling us that story. Latipova, for example, was one of them. And everyone's going, oh, that's terrible. We can't sue them, right? Well, it's not true. You can sue them because you cannot contract with somebody. I mean, there's no law that protects or contract that protects Pfizer from criminal prosecution for developing and manufacturing and developing bioweapons. In other words, the government can't contract someone to break the law secretly. It just, you can't do that. It's not even ethical, but not only is it not ethical, it's just legally easily defeated, that argument. And that was actually what happened in a recent case. A judge finally ruled that, they threw that out when the Pfizer lawyers came with that argument and said, well, we had this agreement, blah, blah, blah. And they said, no, you can't have an agreement with the government to break the law. So, and it turns out, if you look at that contract, their obligation was to deliver what they called a safe vaccine that followed the specific code as codified in the FDA regulations, meaning it had to be tested, safe, approved. They've got all these rules and regulations laid out. You try to put together a drug and get it out there, and you'll be jumping through all these hoops. They're all already pre-laid out, and they're designed to stop people from getting out there too fast, and for usually, idealistically for a good reason, because we don't want everyone just to come out there with some new toxic substance. It has to be tested. But that's the argument that that their lawyers tried to sidestep, and by saying we don't have liability because the government has a secret contract with us. And the fact is they do have liability. So Pfizer can be sued. And that's why there's this woman suing them for, what is it, 3 trillion, something like that, $3 trillion. What's her name? Yeah. Yeah, she used to work there. Basically, what's her name? I can't see here. No. Doesn't matter. You can look it up online. It's basically it's this $3 trillion lawsuit against Pfizer, and they can't get it dismissed because essentially what's happening is they're liable, and we have to hold them accountable. So those two stories right there are out in the open, but and it's just amazing, all these experts, these legal experts and these medical experts out there, they're completely they're either gaslit, into believing the narrative that's being put out there for them to dive into and jump on, or they're just plain stupid. Maybe they've been affected already by the neural networks that are growing in their brains so that they can't think straight any longer. But that's two examples right there of the truth is out there, but we're not acting on it. So the parasites can go ahead and do their plan and pull it off. And, in the end, when it's all said and done, we can't come running and say, guys, that's not, you can't do that. That's like unethical. You have to inform us. No, they've already informed us. We've consented. We've consented in our silence on a large scale. I mean, there's some of us that are screaming loudly about this, but it's not enough. We have to have, thousands out there, hundreds and thousands, and eventually millions and millions, right? So like you've got all these people in France that are protesting right now, but they're protesting things like, I think, quantitative easing, and that they're being squeezed financially.
Mhm.
This is they're upset because their things are expensive, their money's falling too short, and they're protesting, right? Well, what does that do? I mean, on the positive coin side, they're telling us that people can get together, millions of people, and they can make a big stink and they can shut down a country if they want. But at the same time, the negative side of the coin is they're going to scream for government regulations to fix the problem. And that's where the bankers come in, because the bankers have this sneaky plan to bring in something called universal basic income, where everyone
Mhm.
is getting a fair amount of money. It's all equal. There's no more problem. You can't complain because now it's all equal. And so they could be playing unbeknownst to them. Either they're unconsciously not aware of it, or they're being pushed by professional agitators, which they exist. People that go into crowds and they agitate and they get people's things
Sure.
stirred up, and then
Yep.
they push for that regulation to come through, and all of a sudden, bam, we have universal basic income. Oh, by the way, for us to make that happen, now is the perfect time to switch over to digital currency.
Right.
We don't see those people on the street saying, we don't want programmable digital currency. That's not what they're talking about. We don't want any more. We want our government to tell us what these little nanobots inside of our bodies now that
Mhm.
have been put in there, what are they building? Because we have filmed footage now by experts and 26 teams around the planet
Mhm.
that are filming this stuff and analyzing what they're building. What are they building? We'd like to know that. I mean, if millions of people were demanding that, we'd have answers very, very quickly, you can imagine, right? So, yeah, this is in that direction, I think, in terms of, they're getting our consent.
Mhm.
And, our souls are here in our body, and we're, inhabiting these physical bodies as spiritual beings, and we're consenting as a physical extension of our spirit being to these diabolical things that are going on in the world.
Well, the government actually can contract with an agency to commit crime because that's what the government does within itself.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, this is the street version of that law. Yes, absolutely, they do it all the time. I mean, the whole. I always say the American government and the German government, they've become international crime syndicates,
Oh,
basically.
yeah.
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly.
right. But I mean, that's just the street, the street wisdom.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
absolutely.
And I also wanted to comment the terms and conditions thing. It's so funny because if you watch shows like The Simpsons or South Park, you'll see predictive programming. And they had an episode with South Park about terms and conditions and what you were signing away when you just agree, when you hit agree, when you update software.
Yes.
So I think in some of those terms and conditions, you don't realize you are signing your soul away by agreeing to update your software.
For sure.
Right. I mean, how many of us read that fine print?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's 100 pages
Oh,
long.
you
shit.
just spent $3,000 for a computer. You just fire it up, and it says on the software agreement, you must agree, or you're not ain't gonna be using this computer, dude.
Yes.
Like, so you want to sign up or not? And you're like, what are you gonna do? No, I'm not gonna do that. I'll just throw it in the garbage, right? They hook us. They hook us, right? All the
Yeah,
time.
Yeah,
They've hooked us. It's like this slow boiling frog, to make a
yeah,
terrible analogy,
exactly.
right?
Our
We're all slow boiling frogs.
one of our friends, Danny Katz, calls them the powers that were. And I think that that's a really good, powerful incantation to say that. These are not the powers
Right.
that be. These are not elites. These are the powers that were. They're predators.
Right, they're predators. They're predatory beings that they've had their Earth. They've been developing the timeline that they want to migrate to. But if we want to think of the timelines in terms of what our potential is as human creative beings, then that isn't the only timeline that's available. And so,
Exactly.
in the sense that we want to make that leap and create a new timeline and cause the other one to go extinct, then yes, that they do represent the has-beens. They
Yeah.
represent that old timeline. It's over for them, really, and that's the best way to
Yeah.
think of it. But they're still here, unfortunately, thriving to a large degree because of the unconsciousness of the majority of people that are out there.
Well, they're relying on people's laziness
Yes.
and people's desire to comply and to fit in, to be part of the group. and not be outliers. So there's that element. And I do believe that there is some correlation between the poisoning of the food, the poisoning of the water, and the jab. I think that these things are working in concert with each other, and that's
Yes.
part of that nanotechnology, that they can basically change your frequency. I am skeptical about someone being able to take your soul unless you willingly give your soul away. And I think it's that laziness that they're reliant on.
Well, the thing is, you can't take somebody's soul. It has to be given.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is this, they're actually using, like I described, and I've now learned from Dr. Anna in a very technical sense, they're
Mhm.
using the quantum field, which is where you're like our DNA is like a hologram
Mhm.
with a program. And they're using that understanding of the holographic nature of the universe to mimic the real world. And our souls can get, pulled in a way because of the temptations
Mhm.
of
Right.
the transhumanist promise, right?
Yeah.
Immortal life,
Sure.
technology that makes your whole world and your life so much easier, so that all you'll have to do is basically sit back on the couch with your 3D goggles or whatever. Eventually you won't even need those, and zone out, right? It's all about zoning out. This new world that they want to create is like everyone is sedated, everyone
Mhm.
is zoned out and distracted with some kind of digital toy of some kind, or some show, and
Mhm.
all these shows that are out there. I mean, they're getting the level of production is going up, and people are being, they're being lured in and by the, enticed by the, it's like sugar. And
Yeah.
so that is how we give ourselves away. We are volunteering for it, and we can get, we get switched. And then that moment will probably happen where there's more synthetic neurons in your brain than there are organic natural ones.
Yeah.
In fact, they've got even photographs of the brain, tissue that has been inundated by these particles that have grown the neural networks. And you can see the natural brain cells are atrophied. Okay, it's scary.
Well,
And
isn't it interesting? I just quickly want to point this out. You, as a filmmaker, you have made films using real locations, going out into the world. And isn't it interesting how now the mainstream media is really reliant on CGI? So
yes,
that has to be doing something to our brains, that people aren't actually going out and filming on a location, and the justification of that is, oh well, it's really expensive now to go and
right.
do that, so let's just all do it in a studio. So I think there is some element of that where it's tricking people's minds into accepting this artificial intelligent
Mhm.
version of reality as
Yeah.
opposed to real reality.
Right. I mean, if it starts with the education already, with the information flow, where they begin to wean you off of
Mhm.
deep research.
Yes.
And I remember I was on, I think just the other day I was on Inspired, just looking at some of their videos, and I saw that John did an interview with Dr. Northrup,
Mhm.
and I went to her Wikipedia page just out of curiosity, and all it says there is that, she's pseudo this and
Yep.
pseudo that and unproven this and
Mhm.
unproven that, and belongs to the QAnon, conspiracy quacks out there. And they put all these quotes in by third parties that just really bring your impression of that woman. If you're a normie, you'll throw that out in a second. You'll go,
Yep.
okay, well, this is a quack pot.
Mhm.
I'm not going to get into anything that Northrup's got to say. And it's, so this is how they stunt people's curiosity.
Mhm.
And so they've got all these programs out there like Jigsaw and others that out there that are filtering the information and pushing down the search results of things so that you can't even find the articles that maybe as a researcher you previously had bookmarked. And if you go back there, if they've changed their location, those articles are gone. And if you do a search for those articles, they'll never come back because with Operation Jigsaw, they're deliberately pushed and down into the bottom of the ocean of information. So it'll unless you have that actual URL where that now resides, you'll never find it again. So this is the digital book burning. So what's happening is that people that don't go to the effort and read and educate themselves in the traditional sense, and I think the going to a location to film and experiencing the full spectrum experience of being on location falls into a similar category in terms of the arts as the educational part, going into books or reading real books that you hold in your hand that are, that have very, very valuable information that you can't find any longer. Because let's face it, if the book hasn't been scanned, then it's not going to get into the future of humanity, because what's happened is that with all of these algorithms that Google's developing for the AI that has been unleashed to go out and categorize and search and quantify and flag information on the internet, if it isn't digitized, it's never going to be seen. And everything that is digitized is going to be rated according to the wokeness of the algorithm that they've actually programmed. So you thin out the quality of information, and it's easy to read a couple of paragraphs. That people are used to Twitter, where they're, what is it, 200 characters. They're all sort of enticed by Instagram, putting 1-minute videos up and things like that. It's all about less information, less and less information. So, you might be, if there's those of the people that are the few that are still maybe interested in the subject that they just got exposed to with a small taste, out of those few that even bother to go deeper, it's very difficult for them to do that. So the quality of things are going down, which means that our brains are kind of atrophying in a way, because if you don't, it's been proven that neurons will continually grow your entire life. So but the problem is, when your neurons are generated, they're there waiting for you to use them. And if you do not use them, they dissolve again, literally. They disappear again. So you have to actively use, you've got this muscle in your brain inside of your skull, this brain, which is just a muscle. It's not you. It's not who you are. It's actually a tuning fork for other dimensions. It even brings in scalar information that resides outside of the physical, invisible realm. But it's a very powerful instrument, and it has the neurons, which is its way to process the information. And if you're not thinking deep thoughts or challenging yourself on a continually basis all of your life, your brain will literally begin to atrophy, and you'll be, it'll shrink in terms of what its true, not what its potential is, but what its capacity is, because you'll have reduced the amplitude of information, and you'll have reduced the capacity for you to recall things, for you to pull information up. Because the computers do that really well, right? Where you, on your hand, you just put in what was the name of that author again? You just type in some book, and bingo, there it is, right?
Yeah.
So, that was a bad example of that right there before. So I'm trying to find the name of that woman who's got the lawsuit, but I only just read that like one, blurb. So yeah, I have a good excuse. But you know what I'm saying? I know that I know absolutely in my own personal life, because I continually research the names and the information, it does stay longer than I would imagine. I amaze myself sometimes how fast and how amazing I'm able to recall things. But I've also had periods where, I've been a little bit lazier. I've been maybe as focused, and you do notice that you do forget things. So, it's all about training, using that muscle, the brain, to continually keep ourselves active, and the physical body as well. We also have a body that has a digestive system and millions of years of evolution to take, the quantum information of the food that you ingest and translate it into energy to build your body, to keep your body healthy, to keep your cells regenerating. And here we have a lot of, disinformation, or let's say lack of information in the world as well, that has been accumulating over I've been watching it watched how that whole system of the food supply has been degenerating since I woke up to what it was like to do living foods in the 1980s, when I was working with Ann Wigmore, and she was developing, sprouting and unlocking the potential of the seeds and the grass and the sprouts to what their potential is. So you would change the chemistry of things that are normally, fatty or starchy, and they become enzyme rich and full of life force. And
Right.
if you don't realize that information, you're just out there eating TV dinners all the time and buying canned foods and processed foods and eating burgers like the most of the people out there are. What's going to happen to your body? You're going to look, when you're 50 and 60, you're going to look like you're 90.
Yeah,
And if you
because
look
the
at
food
society,
is dead.
right, this
Yeah,
is another part of it, right? So these things all, you have to look at them holistically.
yeah,
So I like the analogy of, going to a set to do filming, as opposed to a virtual set. But I think that that parallels into many other areas of society where
absolutely.
we've become virtual food. You could say, TV dinners are virtual, it's CGI food. It's not real food.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's actually, it's so dead that the bovie count is so low, your body looks at it as toxic. And you
exactly.
develop an elevated white blood cell called pathological leukocytosis, which they used to believe is natural when you digest food, that your white blood cell gets elevated. But then
Mhm.
they did studies of people who actually don't eat dead, denatured food, and they didn't see that happening. So that obviously proves it right there.
I listened to a podcast by a neuroscientist from Stanford University, Andrew Huberman, and he talks about physically writing notes as opposed to doing all of your writing on the computer. And that physically writing things down creates new neural pathways and it actually helps your memory. And I think you're talking about something that has been translated into that other area of our reality, which is everything is digitized. Exactly. So
I'm always writing all the time, all the
we don't
time. I
want
even write,
we
I transcribe whole things. I only look at them once and then they're somewhere buried in my notes. But the actual practice of writing it has begun to help with the retention of it.
exactly. So you are talking about, the digitization of media and of books and how I think you can correlate that to this entire uh predatorial desire to control information, to control the human experience. So having pen and paper, having a physical copy of a book is so important because at the flick of a switch, everything that is digitized can be lost.
Yep.
Yep.
Can all be gone. So what is that going to do? That's going to completely destroy our history. We erode our history by being so reliant on technology and on computers.
Right. And this is how they hijack your soul, really, in the nutshell. And Dr. Anna did some, I mean, she was so amazing. I got to say, you got to watch that interview. That's going to blow your minds.
Can't
Uh,
wait.
but she pulled out a Rudolf Steiner quote,
Love
and
him.
100 years ago, he was saying exactly what will be done to disconnect the soul from the
Hmm.
physical body and to entrap the soul. He was describing 100 years ago exactly what they're doing now.
Yeah.
So it's, there are people that had these visionary abilities. We all have them, but some people were really gifted, and he was definitely one of them. So, the thing is, we do have to, well, we don't have to do anything, but we should, if we care about being human beings and about what it is to be a soul, then we should begin to try to, use those neurons in our brain and to look at what's going on around us in the world. And if we don't like what we're seeing, take steps to either mobilize in a new direction to gain, momentum towards something positive. I mean, I'm not a big fan of protesting against something because I also almost feel like you're giving it energy by doing that.
Yeah.
You're
Exactly.
saying, you're very powerful. We have to go up against you.
Right.
Instead, better to start a new movement altogether. But not everybody can make that happen instantaneously. And we're very, very late in the game, guys, right? It's like, I mean, they've gotten very, very far with where they've taken us in society. So we need to know that there's some help too, which is also what's going on. Actually, we are lucky because we are being helped by the cosmos, because what's clear now more and more every day and what blew my mind when I was making my webinar, because I was putting together not only information about Project Looking Glass and about J-Rods and about the Guardians of the Looking Glass, but what these guys and what these people, these entities, these, in the case of the J-Rods, future humans were talking about 30, 40, 50 years ago, which was documented in something which then emerged about a little over 20, 25 years ago. The doctrine of convergent timeline paradox talks about how the cosmos is connected with us and that we can actually affect the outcome of the cataclysmic event that was the history, or the timeline that the J-Rods embarked on before they, came back in time to warn us about it. Whereas the one faction obviously wants it to go through the way it is. And then the P-52s, they want to try and inspire us to change it, which I found, it sounds very woo-woo and esoteric, and, but if you look at the actual science, you see that, yes, indeed, we are in a zone right now that they were describing where there's this high energy zone, like a Stargate, that is actually opening for us and bringing information in terms of frequencies at us from the cosmos. So you have to ask yourself, is that all just an accident? Is it total coincidence, right? That we just happen to be right there in that place in the cosmos, in the sweet spot, at the same time as other factors are going on, that, like, for example, the magnetosphere is changing, the heliosphere of the sun is changing, the sun has moved into a new cycle, and all these things are all adding up at the same time to be potential carriers or signals of us being pushed or helped, if you want to call it that way, by the cosmos to make this evolutionary leap, because we have the physical biology corresponding to be able to interpret the frequencies coming at us via resonance, because information is transferred via frequency and resonance.
Right. So do you actually think that 2/3 of the population has been given the jab?
Yeah.
Really?
I have some curiosity about that, because I know that continents like Africa have not been influenced to the same degree as Western um, countries. And I think because of that, that's why they are trying to introduce the digital currency. So I think that that's a different way of pivoting the stranglehold on the people who haven't had the jab.
Yeah, but you have to remember one thing, that Africa and those sort of third world countries, which I hate calling them, but they are absolute experimental farms for the pharmaceutical industry. So,
Exactly.
so a lot of these technologies have been developed and tried out of the Western eye in those countries. I mean, look at what's going on in the Ukraine with those labs, right? I
Mhm.
mean, they always do it outside. And Ukraine, unfortunately, really has the standard of a third world country in that definition of being the absolute, highest level of poverty. And for a European country, they're absolutely in desperate straits. So even though they may not have penetrated all those outland areas in those countries that are filled with more wilderness than we have in the Western world,
Mhm.
they don't need to. Like, they have already gotten Chinese, they've gotten the Arab world. I mean, I know friends that were living in Dubai during the whole lockdown period. It was barbaric. It
Mhm.
was draconian what was going on there. In Israel, I mean, it's unbelievable what they did with the people there, right? And the Israelis, what they did with their own people. In Russia, in all of Europe, in all of the United States, and all of Canada.
Mm.
Okay, now there's South American countries, some more, some less, but they don't need to. And that's the diabolical part of what I was discussing with Dr. Anna on that interview, is really that we've got this whole thing about how it transmits to others. It's like you don't need to have everybody vaccinated to be able to get this technology into all the unvaccinated. So, and because what has become clear now is that they've been putting the elements of what is being found by these teams of different researchers, over 26, like I was saying, around the world, is
Mhm.
that they're finding this debris, this metallic debris, barium, aluminum, arsenic, all these things that are in they're finding in the blood of people. They've been putting this stuff out there in the form of chemtrails and smart dust for decades,
Mhm.
which preceded anything that they did with an injection into your bloodstream.
Sure.
And it looks to me more than anything that this actual last step was simply to put technology into our bloodstreams, which was these nanobots, these robots that then when they enter your system, capture your cells, hybridize them to become AI bioweapons, hybridize cells, 50% biology, your biology, and 50% this new hybrid, as I was describing to you in the definition of a bioweapon that has
Mhm.
now been changed. And they're like, they enter your system and then they go rampant and they basically reproduce and they start doing their thing. So but what they do is they don't need to carry that metal into your body. In fact, they did some analysis of the material of the vaccines and they found nothing. They didn't even find mRNA in them.
Mm.
Right. So it means that essentially the technology that's in them seems to be able to gather what's in your body already. It's like they pre-inserted all
Right.
this stuff into our system. And now it just goes in and it begins to assemble whatever the hell it's assembling. That's still the big question, the elephant in the room that I
Mhm.
would like to have an answer to that nobody's really talking about.
Yeah,
A few
exactly.
fringe people are talking about it. I think Stu Peters had Kingston on his show a couple times, and Anna talks about it in her Substack. I'm talking about it. A few other people are talking about, but by far and large, the narratives being tightly controlled in the direction of legal liability for Pfizer for jabs, and the definition of gain of function and the admission of that Wuhan labs were where they originated this virus.
Mhm.
This is all misleaders. This is all distracting us. I mean, let's face it, even the idea of the virus, there's never been a virus has never been isolated and proven to be the cause of disease ever. This is
True.
a theory,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
No one's talking about that. I mean, I saw Del Bigtree screaming his head off at Conscious Life Expo about, you know, ivermectin, the virus this and the virus that. And like for an hour, he had people captivated in terms of all this story about what he did to get the story about the virus and the vaxes out there. And I'm like, the whole time in the back of my mind, I'm going like, dude, there's no such thing as a virus. So you got the wrong story. So a
Yeah.
lot of energy being blown out there into the microphone by a guy who's got huge credibility on the alternative scene, but sorry, wrong story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, it's kinda like the Trump thing. Like
Yeah.
the whole Trump is gonna be arrested. Anytime that something like this, like, is blown through the mainstream
Right.
media, the first thing I think is, "Okay, what are you trying to distract us
Yeah.
from? What's really going on that you're making
Yeah.
this the big story right now?"
Right. It's like we got to stop paying attention, right? I mean, that whole Trump story, of course, came out and people did, oh my God, he's going to be arrested on Tuesday and blah, 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 right? All
Yeah.
those fake pictures came out and stuff. But I never even looked at it. And,
Yeah.
I saw others did their stories, their blogs, and the alt media jumped on it and everything.
Yeah.
But I was like, so it doesn't interest me. Who the hell is this guy Trump anyways?
Yeah.
He's nothing to me.
Yeah. Same
He's
here.
some
He's
guy
yeah,
posing
he's
as a politician that everyone has their hopes set on to change the world, but that still unfortunately falls into the same thing as the virus does with the
exactly,
virus theory. It's the thing about the savior complex.
exactly.
Trump had his 4 years. Imagine what he could have done in those 4 years, what kind of intel drops he could have covertly leaked out into
I
the world.
know.
He didn't even have to do official announcements. He could have found, he's a millionaire, right? He could have hired a little team of covert, smart people like myself and a few others to go out there and start putting information into certain streams that makes it impossible to get the toothpaste back in the paste afterward, about
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. But none of that happened ever. So, and in the end, he still, fast tracked a vax out into the market.
Exactly.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and he says that that was one of his greatest
Yeah, it's
triumphs
great
of
opportunity. He
his
never said, look, there's no such thing as a virus. And I'm still personally working on the idea that there's even a virus, but I've got pressure. Everyone in the world is flipping out. Listen, people, how do you want to solve this together? Like, honestly, I don't think it's a good idea to put these jabs in your body, but I got this old crony Fauci with his team of pharmacratic mafia who's
Yeah.
on my case. and I got to do something, and the whole world's going to, cancel me otherwise. So come on, let's work this out together, people. Right?
I
Did
know
he
he
say
could have
that?
fired Fauci, he could have fired Deborah Bricks. He didn't. He bent his knee to big pharma.
Right,
What
he did.
Chris wants to share something with you that is absolutely compelling and fascinating.
I was just wondering if you were going back to the soul trapping as connected to the Beetlejuice narrative. There's a book by German by Thomas Mayer called "COVID Vaccines from a Spiritual Perspective," and he's coming at it from a Waldorfian Steiner-esque
Hmm.
uh, point of view. Have you heard of the book?
I have not.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't read it yet. We're gonna have the author on after I've read the book, but it sounds fantastic. It's sort of speaking to the same things that you were speaking as far as there being something contained in the Beetlejuice that would somehow capture your soul or your spirit, which something is that's a concept that Steiner has been talking about or has been talking about, talked about when he was alive. And it's brought up in memes and stuff like that. But it looks to be a fantastic book. But I honestly don't know much about it. I was just wondering if you had read it.
No, I haven't actually. I haven't read it, but I like this. This is what it looks like. This is
Mhm.
the technology. What
Wow.
this is from their patents: plasmons and demons and graphene, using artificial intelligence, right? Metals and plasmonic demon fields for spiritual warfare. That's the article that was put out by Dr. Anna, and it gets into the technology, right? And in fact, ultimately, what we're looking at here is something called control of the mind using nanotechnology, right? So hold on, let me zoom that back in again. Um, this is the scientific paper that she breaks down that explains how nanotechnology is being used for mind control, right? So people can take a screenshot of that, but essentially, they want to control our minds. It's the last frontier. And Yuval Harari talks about it. He talks about how we're all just hackable animals. His famous quote.
Yeah,
They don't look at us as sentient beings. They think we're just, and they know because the DNA has been shown to be a holographic code. It is code. You actually can break into the quantum sphere using Q dot technology, and you can begin to change the spin and the energy of the construct that our souls use to inhabit our bodies. And if the soul doesn't rebel against it and gets pulled into it because it doesn't see the difference, because people that are normies, let's say, that don't challenge the official narrative out there, they'll make that jump. Their souls will make that jump into this artificial neural network, which is slowly growing within our within our brains and our whole bodies and our hearts, everywhere. I mean, the people that are pulling those long sausages out of people and died suddenly. I mean, these are all examples of various applications of this technology as described in the Pfizer patents.
Mm.
well, what was your take on that, my dear?
I'm always happy when I hear someone talk a little bit of shit about Trump.
I'm
Just because I think there's so many people that are duped and hanging their hats on the Trump train that I get so frustrated by that when it's people who are supposed to be skeptical and in the alternative media space. To hear anyone think that a politician is gonna fix it is really a fucking eye roll for me. I'm sorry.
is that still a thing? People still do that? People still love
Oh my
Trump?
god, yes, and people I love and respect are
Yeah.
on the Trump train. I
If
could
you
give you
have a Trumpist friend,
I could name so many right now.
now is the time for your friendship to
I
end.
don't wanna out people that I love,
I know.
that love him, and I wanna it's such a it's head scratcher. It's like, how could you possibly think that anyone that is even slightly in politics has that isn't compromised? Like, how
For
could you
sure.
think that? That's
Yeah,
so insane to me.
exactly. It's people don't reach those states of power or positions of power without being highly ethically compromised and totally at the bidding of whatever powers are pulling their strings, basically. But
Yeah.
let's go back to Frank. Frank, fantastic conversation once again. I love his work. I look forward to the new project that's coming up. Um, and I'm always happy to speak with him. I'm sorry that we got the times wrong. So he thought it was 2 hours earlier than it was, and he was totally amped for it.
Mhm.
They can see you primping. And and by the time we actually had the conversation, he was kind of low energy. So but he's still shown through.
I like his jewelry too.
Yeah, he's got a
I'm
lot
all
of great jewelry. He's a
yeah,
snappy dresser too. He's really
yeah.
got that aesthetic down
He's got
for
a
sure.
vibe for sure.
And I wish that we could go to Sedona to see that
Oh
whole thing. That
god.
would be fantastic. I want to go to there anyway because there's so much freakish, wonderful energy that's happening there,
Yeah.
and why can't I? The organ donor, Mitch.
Mitch.
Why I kept wanting to?
Mitch, we love
Matthew kept
Mitch.
wanting to come out, but I
Yeah.
knew that was the wrong name.
Yeah, my mom actually wrote a film about Sedona and the vortexes in Sedona that I
Your mom
have.
wrote a film?
My mom wrote a script
Huh.
that she pitched to Ron Howard, and Ron Howard
What?
was interested in purchasing a film
How the fuck did she
of
know Ron
hers.
Howard?
It's California. It's just a California
It's
thing,
just they're all just one big hot
It
tub.
it
We just shout
it
across it to
is. It
whatever
is
celebrity happens to be on the other
very,
side.
very, very much so. Yeah, absolutely.
Insane.
That's a story for another day.
When we're older.
Oh, sure. What'd you do? Why'd you do that? Why?
Because so we won't be
Looking.
looking at
Oh,
ourselves all the time, and I won't
oh.
constantly be reminded that we're video recording this too.
Ah, I see.
So what did you think about the content? I know we started watching his Packing for Mars last night and
I
today.
I'm interested in this interview that he did last night
Yeah, me too.
and, following up on that, on the research that
Exactly.
Dr. Anna did.
I need to Anna. I need to get a hold of him as to how to spell the last name. It was
I
interesting.
wrote it down, but I don't know that I got it correctly.
I wrote it down too, and I also don't know whether I got it correctly, but if we ask him, I know he will get it correctly.
Sure.
Well, that was quite an expression. Anyway, uh, he he I when I was doing research for this episode, I listened to a few interviews of his recent interviews, and on one that was I think late last year, the person's podcast that he was on had just had Dr. Anna on.
Mm.
Yes. So it's interesting how this leapfrogging happens, but yeah, I want to look into her too.
Yeah, I like his take. I like that he, has there's a cautionary tale element of what he talks about, but he's also a very empowering person
For
and
sure.
really spends a lot of energy and time talking about personal responsibility and where you're focusing your energy and attention and how powerful that is. So I think that's a
Absolutely.
very positive aspect of this because it is easy to get into this fearful, um, powerless mode. And I think that that's part of the mesmerism and that's part of the agenda is to really create this idea that all of these are foregone conclusions and that this is happening and we have no control over it and that these predators are going to be successful. And I don't agree with that. I think that there's always other options.
It's very important to remember just how powerful we are. And this is a struggle that I have too. I sometimes demean and diminish myself and my role in reality, consensus reality, or my own personal reality, or the reality of just my very tight circle of family and friends around me. How important of a role we play in that, and therefore the world, because everything is connected. So you start at one point and it eventually hits all points, maybe more indirectly, some more indirectly than others. But so that that aspect becomes very crucial when you're dealing with this kind of information, because if you are constantly immersing yourself in it and it's just freaking you out and that's all it's doing, with a little bit of feeling informed there, or like you're in on some secret, then that's not worth it. That's not worth it at all. You're incapacitated by your fear, and that's not going to make you act in a lucid and clear way, or a loving way, because most likely it's going to put you in a very reactive state. I've seen it happen firsthand, and it makes for unpleasant company. Let's say that. But yeah, if you got it, that's where knowing yourself comes in too. You have to know how much of that you can take, and also, as Frank was saying, it's important to know the context, and to utilize your critical thinking when you're going into these places. Because even actually to confess, the first Frank Jacob interview that I heard on Forbidden Knowledge News freaked me out. But as I listened to it, I should say initially, as I listened to it and I got more of a feel for what was actually happening and I saw the greater context of what he was talking about, I got less freaked out. Of course, it's normal to be somewhat freaked out because you're reacting with your humanity at something that seems very inhumane. So I think a certain measure of that is healthy, but not to be totally subsumed by it and have it, just sort of the domino effect, have it affect you, therefore the people around you, therefore the people that are around them in a negative way.
Well, I just think about the kids and how the kids are influenced and affected, and how porous we are as humans, and how our frequencies adjust to each other.
Mhm.
And so if we are convinced of some narrative, it's easy to try to embed those perspectives on people around us
For sure.
and the kids. And I just feel like they have enough to navigate in life, um, because they're kind of ping ponging back and forth into separate realities. And so I think that can be very confusing if both realities are trying to subliminally convince them that their reality is the reality.
For
And
sure.
so I think one thing that I'm really trying to impart and embody is healthy skepticism and discernment and their own ability to critically think and feel and have their own frequency awareness. And if something doesn't resonate as truthful to them, that's important for them to acknowledge that they don't have to agree with what we say, and they don't have to agree with what other people say. They've got to arrive at their own, view of the world on their own.
And that's why you're such a good mom.
Yeah. It's it's a lot. We got big plate. We got a lot of things on our
Yeah.
plate. We got 7 chickens now and 4 dogs and 2 teenage boys and
They're really
a
one
a lot of things we're keeping alive.
one brain and 4 dogs, really is what it is. Um, yes. So, yeah, but hey, we wouldn't want it any other way. Life is meaningful. These things mean something. They can see you
Exactly.
yawning.
Exactly. Well, see, I can't see myself yawning, so that makes me forget that I'm on camera. So that's why I'm yawning away.
She's really not bored by this.
I'm
She's
not
just
bored.
tired. She's
I'm
hungry, and we've got a
hungry,
lot of stuff to do after this, so I'm
tired.
gonna wrap it up. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's don't leave them with heavy stuff. I would
just the
like
truth.
the truth. Yeah, the truth is heavy sometimes. Noted. Thanks to all of you for sharing, retweeting, and liking our content. There's been a lot of that going around, and it's super appreciated. And it makes uh, it worthwhile to know that you all who are listening think highly enough of what we do to share it with your friends and whoever's listening. So, thank you so much for doing that. And I would like to once again, and I forget to, it's not that I don't think of it, but thanks to the patrons who really contribute and help to keep the show alive. It really makes a hell of a lot of difference. It's very, very helpful for the show
Mhm.
and for our lives and our well-being. So thank you so, so much for doing that. And it's been wonderful to meet you in the monthly melt meetups,
Mhm.
which we also turn into Patreon only episodes that you can listen to if you're a patron. So thank you so much. And I highly encourage you to do that. Right now it's $3. I believe before the end of the year, I'm going to raise it to $5 because it's not that much of a difference, but it would make a hell of a lot of difference to us. And that wouldn't change for people who have already become patrons. So
Yeah.
and we are setting up an account on Locals too. Locals seems to be a much more open-minded version of Patreon. So we'll have our stuff both places, but I someday Patreon is just going to access, and we're not going to be able to post stuff there anymore. So what?
Maybe or maybe not.
Maybe or maybe not, but who cares? We'll have
Yeah.
other routes. But
Y
they're a highly censoring organization too. People get pulled from Patreon all the time.
We're not gonna get pulled because we
I don't care.
rock.
I don't need them. I don't need them. Even if
But we're happy that you're contributing, so we need you. Our listening and viewing audience, we need you. We're glad you're
patrons,
here. Yeah,
yeah. I'm talking about
I know,
Patreon.
I know.
Yeah. I'm
I
not
got you.
talking about
I
the
got
actual
you.
human beings out there.
I got
Um,
you.
So thank you all so much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope that you have gotten something positive from this and it left you not feeling freaked out and
Yeah.
fucking scared and
And when is this episode coming out?
snappy at your friends and family. This episode should be coming out Friday the gosh, hold
Friday the
on.
Gosh.
Friday the 31st.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Stacy and Hank and Noelle, you should have received your books by then because I sent them
Yes.
yesterday.
And another benefit of being a patron is that we get stacks of books from publishers, and some we keep and some we don't keep. And so we present the books that we don't get or that we don't keep, I'm sorry, and tarot card decks and stuff like that too. We uh, put them up
Share
for
the
grabs.
wealth.
Yeah, put them up for grabs
That's
for
right.
patrons who might be interested in having them. So you get them free of charge.
Exactly. So just reach out to us, send us a email, and we've posted a new photo of the books that we have available and pick out
If
what
you're a
you
patron,
want.
yes.
Well, isn't this just going out to patrons?
Yes,
Y-
but we're not just talking to patrons. We're talking to everybody in this.
Oh, so this is going out to everyone, not just
Yeah.
patrons.
Well, I've started switching it where this closing after Bible thing that we do, I put them on both versions of the podcast.
Ah,
Yes. So this isn't
so
just patrons.
if you want a free book,
Become a patron.
hey, yeah, exactly. We've
Yes.
got a stack here of books that I'm more than willing to send you if you would like one. So that's a good incentive
Absolutely.
to join our fam.
Yes.
We love you.
We love you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for listening. And yeah, keep it locked. We have lots of good
And
stuff
JJ, I
coming.
love my ring. I've been wearing
Oh yeah.
it. Yeah.
Fucking great ring.
Absolutely love it.
Good
I
work,
need,
JJ.
but see, now my other hand needs another power ring. See how that works?
I don't know if you do male rings, but I would gladly pay you for one.
Yeah.
Less flashy,
Yeah.
although hers is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. All right.
Ta-ta.
Love you guys.
Farewell.
Have a great, great day.